Okay, next up is going to be Thievery and Magic. I'm going to put these two things together. Let's start with Magic. First things first are your self spell, which, hey, looks like I need to update, right? Every race is going to have a different set of self spells. You can either cast down here from this list where it says cast, see how it turned into a little finger? So you can just click it. I'll show you right now. Here's Nature's Blessing. Boom. Your wizards gather blah, blah, blah runes, cast for that many days. And look, because I'm a cleric, I got lucky and it doubles. So now I have Nature's Blessing the 8 days. Yay. Or you can choose from the scroll down list, which you can't see on here, but there's a list that you can scroll through on. But yeah, so those are the two ways to cast self spell. It's important that you know what your spells do, because there are people casting things like fanaticism 24/7, and you don't always want to have fanaticism. Increases your offense by 5%, but it also decreases your defense by 5%. So you don't typically want to have it just cast all the time, because all you're doing is lowering your defense. You only want to cast it when you're like, okay, I need to attack this province and I don't have quite enough offense to break him. But if I cast Fanaticism and give myself 5% more, now I can attack him. That's what Fanaticism does. It's good for you to know what your spells do. The easiest way to do this, you scroll up here and you click on Wiki. You don't need a right click, you could just click it, automatically goes to a new link. The way I do it, you scroll down just a little bit, where it says external actions, and you can click on Mystics. And here's all of your self spells, all, not just the ones that are yours, but all of them that are available and have been available, and all of the offensive. I know it's kind of a lot. You can also just ask. It takes a little time to learn what each spell does, but like, some of the basic ones that you want to remember that everybody has. Minor Protection increases your defense by 5%. Magic Shield increases your defensive wizards per acre by 20%. You don't really want to have this all the time, but in war you probably do. Fertile Lands increases the food you produce. Don't necessarily need it 24/7, but it can be nice to stock up on some food in case you want to send a dragon, or etc. Nature's Blessing. This one, unless you're an End of War Seasire, you probably do want to have it a lot or all the time, because you never know when some random province is just going to cast storms or drought on you, and that can really be shitty, especially drought. If you're running kind of tight on food anyway, and they cast drought on you, and you're like, what? Come on. It's happened. Love and Peace increases how many peasants you get. Now, if you're not making any peasants, then there's no need, like if you're already max population, there's no need to have them. The only other reason you could want Love and Peace cast would be if you just got some new stables and you want your horses to come. That's it. Love and Peace is not something you want to have all the time. Divine Shield is only available to clerics. It's more of a war spell, like while you're in war you want to have it. You're being focused on spells. Builder's Boon is one to know. Everybody has it. You want to basically cast it anytime you're going to build. It decreases your build time. I think that's all it does, but it decreases your build time, and you want to get your build faster. Anytime you're going to build, make sure you have that cast. Inspire Army. This one is closer to a 24/7 one because it does two things. One, it decreases your training time, so you want to do it before you're training. But if you're like me, you're almost always training. And two, it decreases your wages. And that's pretty important when you're fully trained. So even if you're not currently training anything and you're trying to get those troops more quickly, it decreases your wages by like 20% or something. So it's really not bad. Go skipping to, okay. Fanaticism, I think, is something everybody has. Again, I already explained that one. Patriotism is something that everybody has. This increases your draft. Now, most of the time, you're going to want to play with your draft on this. You can go anywhere from none to emergency, reservist, aggressive. This is usually enough. The only time you really want to do patriotism is if you're doing emergency and patriotism. Otherwise, you know, why not just change, like if you're at normal but you want to go a little faster, why not just do aggressive instead of casting patriotism? Yeah, that's basically the gist of that. So patriotism is not something you want to have. The other two spells that everybody has is anonymity and shadowlight. They're different. They're not spells that have a duration. Anonymity, if you cast it, the very next time you attack, it'll be anonymous. Now, you don't want to overdo it with this. The main reason to use anonymity is if you're worried your attack is going to get ambushed. Anonymity prevents ambush. So if you're playing Avian, you never need to use it if that happens. Nobody can ambush you since Avian are immune to ambush. The bad thing about anonymity is that it decreases your gains by 15%. And it also, you gain no honor from it. So it's not a great thing to do all the time, but if it's like a big, important attack against a chain target, it may be something that I ask you to do to prevent that target from ambushing you and getting acres back easily. So that's anonymity. But the thing about a chain target is like, it's usually if you only have one attack. If you're able to attack a chain target more than once, then ambushing becomes less of a thing for that province because the way ambushing works, you ambush back. So long story short, most of the time you don't need to be using it. Shadowlight is kind of like a silly spell. It works. It's not a duration. It's there until somebody does a thievery operation on you. Now that thievery operation could just be a spy on throne, and there goes your Shadowlight, right? The reason it's kind of nice is to see who's scouting you. Most of the time you want to have this spell during end of ceasefire because excuse me, because like people are always on the lookout to see like, ooh, this kingdom is coming out of ceasefire, let's check on them and stuff like that. And then you can be like, hey, I just got intel by X kingdom or whatever, so keep an eye out for them. And that's what Shadowlight does. But I wouldn't recommend having it outside of war, or especially during war. That's just a waste of runes. And then Paradise is another way to explore. It's better than exploring because the acres come in immediately, and it doesn't cost soldiers or gold, but it costs runes. Unless you're Dark Elf, then that is the only way you should ever be exploring, is by casting Paradise. So that's it for self spells. Now let's go to combat spells. Now these are all drop downs. They update based on the relations you are with the kingdom. So for most kingdoms, you start off at normal. Well, for all kingdoms, you start off at normal relations, which means you can only cast a few spells like storms, droughts, gluttony, greed, and explosions. That's it. Unless you're a specific race, you might have access to a few other things. If you reach unfriendly relations with that kingdom, or rather, if they reach unfriendly with you, then you get a bigger list of spells. And then if they reach hostile, then you get, I think, pretty much all of the available spells. There might be a couple spells that are only during war, as there are with thievery operations. But anyway, the gist of it is that takes more time. I'm not going to go through what all the spells do. I will go through just a few of them because everybody has access to them. And if you're doing these spells, you need to know these things. First, never cast storms and droughts. They cancel each other out. So they override each other. If you cast storms on a province and then you cast droughts, storms will go away and they'll be in drought. If you cast drought and then storms, drought will go away and they'll keep storms. Almost never will I ask you to cast storms. I always prefer drought because drought is just better. There can be reasons for storms, don't get me wrong, but most of the time I deal with that in a different way. So drought is the one you want most of the time. Gluttony. Oh, and what does drought do? Drought reduces the amount of food that you make, so helpful to starve a province or to slow down funding of a dragon. It also kills war horses. Most people don't know that part. Droughts are really good. Gluttony increases how much food the province eats, stacks really nicely with droughts to make it really, like, you know, some provinces really struggle with starving, and also funding dragons, right? Because dragons require food now. Now, a quick note about both droughts and gluttony. You almost never want to cast those spells on an undead, right? Maybe droughts to kill some of their war horses, but that's kind of a stretch. Greed. Greed is a great spell and increases their wages. That is something you want to do to every single province. Now, when I say you do, I'm talking more to mages here. Spells are difficult to land. There's a lot of random factor to them. Okay, so back to self spells real quick. We're talking about difficulty and randomness. There's always a chance for you to fail a spell, no matter how many guilds you have, no matter what your wizards per acre is. And there's always a chance for you to succeed a spell. There's only one exception to that. If you have 0 wizards, which you can do that by releasing wizards. I'm not even going to show you how, because don't do that. But if you have 0 wizards, you can't cast spells. Pretty sure, unless that was changed. Anyway, there's always a chance for you to succeed. There's always a chance for you to fail. That includes for self spells. That includes for offensive spells, no matter what. Think of it as like a 5% always fail, 5% always succeed. I don't know if that's the actual number, but think of it like that. For self spells, you know, the ones you cast on yourself, these good spells, the success rate is greatly enhanced by the amount of guilds you have. If you have 20% guilds, then you have the maximum success rate for self spells. That doesn't mean you're going to always succeed. Remember, there's always that 5%, right? But that is as high as the amount of guilds you have if you want to have good success rate. This is important for rituals. You don't want to make the people cast that ritual if they're running something like 5% guilds, because they're going to be failing a lot. And especially for ritual, that's expensive. So if somebody's running really low guilds, it's better for them to send their runes to somebody else with higher guild, even if that province costs more to cast those. All right, so self spells, only based on your guild percent, right? It is not based on how many wizards you have per acre. Now, offensive spells, which you can click on sorcery or you can click on the tab cell for combat. That's where it's based on wizards per acre, all right? Now, this concept is going to apply to Thievery too, so pay attention to both. Man, I need something to drink. Let's go to Intel site. Let's sort by raw wizards per acre. So take a look at Bulbasaur. He's an elf mystic. He has 2.73 raw wizards per acre. What's more important is the modified number here. His offensive wizards per acre is all the way up to 5.63. Why is it so high? How did he do that? 1, he's playing an elf. Elves get bonus 30%. 2, sciences. 3, I think honor a little bit. That's it. But basically that's it. Between his sciences and his innate racial bonus, he has a whopping 5.63 offensive wizards per acre, right? Whereas let's compare to Nidoking. I'm right here. My offensive and defensive is both 1.1, right? Okay. So this is where it comes important to, if you're playing a mage that you want to cast offensive spells. Oh my gosh. So sorry. This is where you want to look. Let's take a look at meteor showers. First, you can see here, it's available to mystics with a minimum relationship of hostile. You have to be hostile. Duration. Does it say difficulty? It does not have a difficulty. Oh boy. Okay, This spell has a very high, that's casting rich. I did. Paradise is difficult. Some spell descriptions will say this spell is difficult. Landlust is very difficult. Oh boy. I used to just kind of have it in my mind what the sort of generic amount for things are. That's something you're going to have to just ask me or figure out yourself. Let's just talk about the main ones, okay? Fireball. Fireball is something that I ask people to do a lot. Fireballs cost, or you need to have approximately 1.5 times their defensive wizards per acre to have about a 50-50 chance of succeeding. I hope that made sense. So let's take a look at, so let's say I have 1.5 wizards per acre and somebody else has 1 wizards per acre. Then whenever I cast a fireball on that province, each time is a 50-50 chance that it will succeed or fail, approximately. So the higher your wizards per acre, the more that success rate goes up. So 2 wizards per acre versus their 1, now you're probably looking at more like 75% chance of success instead of 50. Or let's say I have 1 wizards per acre and they have 1 wizards per acre. Well, now you're looking at probably more like a 25% chance, or maybe even lower, of success rate. So why is that important? Because let's say you are trying to cast fireballs on a target and you cast 5 fireballs and all of them fail. Well, you probably should stop, because at that point you're just wasting mana and runes. And your wizard's breaker is probably just not high enough for that province. So either find another province to fireball, or you shouldn't be doing fireballs. There is a couple of other things that affect success rate, which is like the size. So, but in war, that's not really something that's there to. All right, the same concept applies to thievery. Okay, so just instead of wizard's per acre, you're looking at thieves per acre. So again, let's sort by offensive, right? We have Caterpie, a halfling rogue. That's incredible thieves per acre. Now, the thing I would say about thieves per acre, 1, it's easier to increase because you have a whole building that you can use to increase your thieves per acre, in addition to science. So unlike magic, it's either for wizards per acre, it's just the wizards you've trained, your race or personality bonus, and your science. That's it. Well, for thievery, it's your race, personality bonus, your science, the thieves you train, and there's a building. So that's why it's a little easier to stack thieves per acre modifiers than it is wizards per acre. Why is that important? It's not too terribly important. It is for rogues. Rogues have access to some crazy operations. Basically, assassinate wizards and propaganda. So since only rogues have those, I'm not going to really explain those, but that's really important for rogues to have a really high thieves per acre compared to their opponent in order to succeed frequently with that. But most non-rogues that are going to be doing thievery are going to be doing things like stealing resources and night strike. That's going to be your big one. Now, I think in that wiki page, you can look at thievery as well, right? So there's mystics and there's thievery. I don't know if you saw that, actually. I think my camera was covered. So external actions, mystics, thievery. Go to thievery. There's also a thievery formula, and you can look at magic formula. So you can actually see, you know, your raw times this, times that, times that, times that, times that gives you a certain. Right? But anyway, let's go thievery. This one actually tells you, I'm pretty sure, so spy on throne, very low. Spy on defense, very low. But if you're getting into things like infiltrate, it's kind of low. But then you get to things like sabotage wizard, medium, destabilize guild, medium. So this actually tells you the difficulty. So thievery is a little bit more figured out that magic is. Magic is kind of like this obscure, unknown thing in Utopia. You have to kind of like get used to it and figure it out yourself. The most difficult ones are Assassinate Wizards and Propaganda. Those are the very difficult things to cast. Those are the ones where you really need to have like much higher DPA than your opponent. Okay, so that's it for Magic and Thievery. Again, if any of these guides, if you have questions, ask me please. I know some of these are long, like this one. But with Thievery and Magic, that's why attackers are often recommended to people.